Hi, everyone. My name is Meg Stewart, and I am one of the founding members of Middle Pause and Stomp, our podcast today. And I am normally behind the scenes with Middle Pause and the podcast. I am today filling in for Debbie Walker, our fearless leader. And with me today, I am pleased to have Carol Lennox. Carol, I'm so glad you're here. Hi.
Hi, Meg. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here this week. I think this will be fun. Just a brief thing about me. I'm a medium writer since 2018, but not really since 2019 when I got semi-serious about it. And I say that because I'm primarily a humor writer. I write mostly on Medium, but I also write, obviously, for you guys and Crow's Feet. And then I also write for An Injustice, Sexography, and a couple of, and my own, my goodness, I own one called New Choices. Feel free to write for us, please. And I think that's mostly about me. I'm a psychotherapist, a hypnotherapist. My bio says I lean left so far that I'm about to fall over. I was a mindfulness and anti-racist practitioner long before it was cool.
I'm so excited to have you here today. And I did a little bit of reading because I wasn't familiar with you at first. So I think we have a lot of things in common in our background. One of the things that I read is that you have a Gulliver's Travels of careers. So can you tell us a little bit about the careers that you've had, like how you got started and how that ended up where you are now?
Yes, I'm going to try to make that super short, though. It can take up the whole podcast. I started out as a teacher 1,000 years ago. I did that for 3 years, special ed. I really loved the kids. I really hated the system. So after 3 years, I actually got the book, What Color is Your Parachute? By the way, that guy writes one every year. I don't know how old he is because, wow, that was a long time ago, but he writes one every year. What Color is Your Parachute? I worked through the book and I came out with what I really wanted to do was stay somehow in education, but also get into marketing, public relations, and even advertising. And so I followed his rules, which are, boy, I don't know if we have time to go into that, but they're amazing. They're amazing. They're basically like call people up you want to work for and ask if you can interview them, not them interview you for a job, but can you interview them about what they do? And I did that. And the president of a college hired me. And then I worked there for 3 years. Yeah. And then I met a guy at an awards banquet who had his own agency and I literally stalked him. This was before cell phones. So people would spot him downtown and call me and say, here's where he is. And I would hop in the car and go there so I could accidentally run into
my
it.
goodness. All right. We won't tell the police about that. No stalking.
Well, he knows about it now.
Okay.
He's okay with it now. But yeah, so then he did hire me and we joined a big agency and we built our office from 3 people to about 20, 30 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then I made a series of mistakes that, you can read about. But bottom line is I left and started my own ad agency. And I did that I worked for the other agency 5 years, had my own agency for almost 4. And then, and this is really good, I think, for Middle Pause, then it went to a deep, dark depression because my company went under. And my husband voted with my 2 partners. He was a financial partner. He voted with the 2 partners to close my company without warning me ahead of time.
Oh, my goodness.
We are now divorced.
I think I know why.
Yeah. And we have been for over 30 years. I went into a dark depression for a couple of years. I did some real midlife crazy stuff at age 38, 39, 40. And then at 40, I got pregnant on purpose, not with the husband.
Okay. All right.
2 years before I got pregnant, I went back to grad school and started studying to be a therapist. And that's what I've done since 1993.
Okay. Yeah. I read that about you becoming, you were a stepmom, but then you became a mom at 41, right? I have 4 children and my last 2, one, I was 35 when she was born and the other one, I was 39. So that late in life pregnancy, I think is something we have in common. And it is very different from having kids when my first 2 were in my 20s. So a very different experience with the second 2 than the first 2. I also read that you did some work in the prison, right? As a counselor, as an internship in the prison while you were pregnant, right? Yeah. So how was that?
Oh my goodness. You know what? I am foolishly fearless. And I still am, but I certainly was back then. So it really was not and should have been. My classic example of that is I was doing a small group of women and The funny story was one of the women was talking about how when she got out, she was worried because she thought her boyfriend would stalk her when she got out. And I said, well, what can we do to set up some boundaries for you? How can we create this situation where you feel safer? And she goes, well, I shot him twice.
Oh my goodness. And that didn't do it.
But, and here comes the funny part. I said, well, obviously you didn't aim very well. So most of what I do and say and everything is humor. I do lots of humor. But what I did do there that was really scary, that was stupid, was in the same group of women, two of them got into an altercation and jumped up and were face to face with each other in each other's face. And the guard is outside the door. So we're inside a room with the door closed. The guard can see, but he's outside the door. I jumped up, little pregnant me, I'm 5'2", and put my hands up between these two ladies and said, stop it. And they did. But later, my supervisor said, oh my God, Carol, don't ever get between two inmates.
Right. I had a similar experience with, and I know you also did this. I worked in an alternative high school with kids that had behavior issues, and two of them got into it, and I stepped in between them and shoved one of them backwards out into the hallway. So I know how you just kind of make that move, right? I don't do that as much, I think, now that I'm older as I did when I was 25, 30. Yeah, I know that instinct of jump between, because you're also the mom, right? So you have to kind of separate the children, kind of thing is the mentality. I want to talk about your writing, because I know that you've been writing for a long time, right? As long as you can remember, but you've had some interesting things happen. One of which you stumbled into screenwriting, if I read this correctly, through a dating app. So can you tell me about that? How did that come about?
Yes, I can. You read a lot of my stuff, man. I'm impressed. Yes, I did. I was, what was I doing? I was just looking for love in all the wrong places. I was online, and a guy, we matched, and he was a screenwriter, and he actually had written a couple of pretty big things. So he did one with Patrick Stewart in it. That was one of his original screenplays. But he was older than me, and I'm older than Dirk. He wasn't a puppy. And I met him, and I didn't like his attitude. He just was very, in my opinion, pretty chauvinistic. I didn't really like his attitude in the first date. But then he asked me to go to a film premiere here in Austin by a wonderful woman here who was doing an indie film. He had been interviewed in it. So I said, sure, I'll go. Well, it turns out the film was nothing about what he thought it was about. And of course, she cut his interview, and then he was upset. And I was like, okay, I'm so done with this man. And then he invited me to a screenplay writer's group. And I said, I'll go, but we're just going as friends. We're not together. We went, and he still tried to act like we were together, and yada, yada, yada. So I went up to the head of it at the end, and I said, look, I'm not here with him, that we're not together. I've never written a screenplay, never even thought about it, but I'm a therapist, and I'd love to come sit with you guys and just give you feedback on whether your characters are realistic or not. He was like, yeah, we'd love to have that. We met every week, and about, 2 months in or less, he's like, so when are you going to write a screenplay? Now it's like, damn it, I knew this was a trick. So no, I've written 2.
You've written 2 screenplays. You write humor all over Medium. I found you everywhere on Medium, it seemed like. And you also write for sexography. And specifically, you mentioned to me sexual issues and topics for older women. So what are some of those that you've written about recently some of our listeners might be dealing with?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't know that I've written about them recently. That's interesting, but you can find them under my profile. Basically, what I write about for older women is things that surprised me. They just hit me over the head. I had no idea. I had a guy that I was in a relationship with long distance, hadn't seen him in months and months. And this was probably when I was 62, maybe younger. Oh, no, I was younger, probably 58 or 9. And I went to see him, and we tried to make love. And it was like somebody was scraping the inside of me with razor blades.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
Yeah. No, it was horrible. And so I came home, and I called my doctor, and I said, oh my God, do something. I found out that that's called vaginal atrophy. Which is a perfectly horrible name for that condition. Basically, it means that when you're not producing hormones, then the vaginal tissues dry up. So it really is like having, like you're scraping something. It's horrible. She put me on hormone replacement therapy. And I know that for many of our generation that's been controversial. So I want to address that really quickly. there was only one study that said, or that indicated, by the way, that's how you talk about research. I know you know that it indicated that hormone replacement therapy could cause breast cancer. That was a very flawed study, number one. And number two, nobody else has been able to replicate it.
I read that.
So isn't that horrible? And it influenced our whole generation. We were not supposed to get old. And we did because we thought we couldn't do that. I got on that. I only take progesterone now, partly personal reasons. And I think everybody needs to talk to their GYN and ideally an endocrinologist. Estrogen causes fibroid tumors to grow. Mine are shrunk. I don't want them back, so I don't do estrogen. But the progesterone alone creates for me lubrication and the libido.
Okay.
If I was in an ongoing relationship and the libido dipped, I would probably add some testosterone. I'm a real believer in let's stay healthy, young, and sexually active if we want to. And also, if you are sexually active and the vaginal atrophy is an issue, then hydrohyaluronic acid can be put into a compound and you can insert that vaginally. And, that hyaluronic acid is what we put on our face. It attracts 1,000 times its weight in moisture.
Wow. As you said that, I'm like, wait, isn't that what we put on our face to get rid of the wrinkles, right?
Yep.
That's interesting. I think this is fascinating. And I want to make sure that our listeners know that always talk to your doctor before you do any kind of change because everybody's situation is different. The stuff that you've mentioned is just fascinating. I read that study that it was only one study and that it was flawed and that our whole concept of hormone replacement therapy being related to breast cancer was based on this one flawed study. And that is it's horrifying. You've probably seen this, but I've been seeing the commercials for motor syndrome, right? VMS, they're calling it instead of PMS, right? They're saying VMS, V as in Victor, and talking about the fact that all of that trigger for hot flashing is coming from your hypothalamus. Something I didn't know until like in the last couple of months. I've seen this commercial. So always ask questions from your doctor and make sure that you are asking questions and know what's going on because there's so much about menopause and hot flashes and hormones we've thought was decided or figured out and was fact, and it's really not. We did what we could with what we knew, and now we want to ask questions so that we know better and we can do better, right?
All right. I would get more than one opinion. I haven't gone to an endocrinologist, but it's one reason I recommend that along with your GYN or your GP because quite frankly, some of the older doctors are still quoting that same research. Yeah, it's a good idea to kind of shop around and not just you'll find somebody that agrees with you, but somebody that really knows all the current information.
Yes, I think the current information, that is important to understand. Even if it's a doctor that you like and you trust, to find out how current is their information that they're basing their decisions on or their information that they're giving you, right? Yeah, right. Fantastic. So all of that is so important. I also know that one of the things that you mentioned you wanted to talk about was Peace Pilgrim. And I am almost embarrassed to admit that I had to go look that up because I'm like, okay, Carol, let's talk about Peace Pilgrim. I don't know what that is. I went to look it up and Googled, and I spent quite a bit of time listening to different videos and documentaries because I was instantly hooked. So I want you to tell me, I'm still very much a newbie, but I loved it. And tell me about Peace Pilgrim and mindfulness and how that part of your spiritualness got going and where are you with it now? What are you?
Roy, that's wonderful. And thank you. I didn't know I was opening a huge can of worms there, but I love it. Yes, I'm looking online right now because I want to see who on Medium wrote about that or about her recently that sparked me to remember all this.
Okay.
So it was one of the people I follow. So she wrote about her and I had met her and, she died in 81. Yeah. So for me to have met her was pretty phenomenal. I belonged to a group at that time called Partners in Prayer, and their sole prayer was peace on earth. That was their sole prayer. And so they invited her to come stay with them and to talk with us. And she did. And I was probably, 23, maybe younger, might have been 21 or 2. And so I got to meet this fabulous woman. And what she does, for those who don't know, is that in 1953, she decided that she would sell everything she owned and start walking across the country for peace. And so she wore a jacket or a tunic that said Peace Pilgrim. And on the back, it said 250,000 miles for world peace. And she did this 7 times over the time from 53 to 81. Just the most peaceful, beautiful woman I've ever met. Her inner peace was so obvious and so magnetic. I was thrilled to see that somebody had written about her on Medium. And then I answered and said, hey, I met her at
the thing that I read or listened to, I guess, because I was listening to some documentaries, and was that it was all about this inner peace. She was very much about inner peace. But what she said in the part that I read was that the inner peace then flows out and becomes external, right? So she was talking about peace from war at a time when it wasn't popular to be talking about peace from war. But it started as this journey to inner peace and then just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I just, that was fantastic. And the idea that one person, and I know I'm not summarizing this correctly, but the idea was that one person doing the thing they think is the most important can make that much difference. And so that's what she was, this one person doing this thing that she thought was so important. And just made all this difference for so many people, even you coming how many years later, still having
a lot.
What else did you want?
Just to reiterate what you were saying, and also to tie this in with something that I just found out, also through Medium. So many things you learn on Medium. I learn on Medium, everybody does. That Mother's Day was originally started for a mom to unite mothers for world peace.
Wow.
And I never knew that. So isn't that cool?
I didn't know that either.
Mm-hmm. And I just love that when it ties in with Peace Pilgrim's work as well. And so, yes, she did influence me pretty dramatically. The Power of Now and Ram Dass's Be Here Now and all of that, brought me to mindfulness, which again, I've been practicing since I guess I was in my 20s. And so that all ties together. And I don't want us to veer too far from that. But for Middle Pause, I really want to reiterate something that she quoted she said in her last interview. And that was in 81. And the interviewer asked her, do you mind if I ask you how old you are? And she said, I don't mind, but I don't know. She said, in 1953, when I decided to start this journey, I had acquired a sufficient number of years, and I have not counted since. And she said, our thoughts create our reality. So when we think that we are old, when we're concentrating on old age, we become old. And I just thought, wow, that is just exactly how I feel. Exactly how I feel.
That, I'm almost speechless. That is amazing. Right? That's a tough one. I'm so glad that you pointed that out, because I'm 53. I will be 54 next week. And I certainly, other than this health issue that I just had last year, I certainly don't feel as old as my kids think I am, right?
Right.
So it's amazing to me to hear you put it in that way, because it really is about how you feel versus your physical body, your physical age in years or whatever.
Yeah, I really believe that. My son thinks I'm younger than I am. I mean, he perceives me as much younger than I am. I'm 70.
My goodness.
And
I would not, I would not have put you at 70. So your son is right. You do not look 70 to me. I would have put you there.
I appreciate that. Well, and, I've had not huge health issues, although recently one that's more serious that we're working on right now. But I did break both ankles a year and a half ago. Actually, almost 2 years now, but I broke both of them at the same time. And ordinarily, I think most of us, and me probably unmedicated, the depression would have set in pretty seriously. But again, I treat most things with humor, and I started people laughing in the ER and had nurses laughing through the whole week I was in the hospital after surgery, and then in the rehab, and people nurses would come from other places to my room and go, I hear this is where the party is. So I'm just, again, I'm a real believer in let's make fun of ourselves and situations and look at whatever the brighter sides are, whatever they are, instead of, going down those rabbit holes of, oh, poor, pitiful me, and I'm getting old and things are so hard and yada, yada, yada. And I know that is, please, people who are depressed, believe me, I understand depression. I have suffered from it myself, and I'm medicated now, which made all the difference. Plus therapy. I'm a therapist, believe in therapy. I'm really not saying that depression is only your thoughts. I'm saying, though, that thoughts are a part of it and that you can work with yourself to train those thoughts, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that. And I think that laughter and humor, what a fantastic way to bring people out of what they're dealing with. We have someone on on the Middle Pause team, Marilyn Flower, who also writes humor. And she takes on some pretty serious and sometimes tragic topics using humor, which is fantastic. And I think that humor can give you an entry point to talk about some of these more serious, sometimes controversial topics without having everybody be immediately defensive, right? I think humor gives us our way of kind of coming together. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about your humor writing, because I know that is what you're doing now, and tell us how that's going for you and where you see that going in the future.
Okay. Oh, I'd love to. So I write for Medium mostly. I've done some other things here and there, but I'm an editor for Medium. So that's where I primarily post my humor. I also write humor under my own name just because I tend to have a humor voice in most things. I do it in New Choices as well. The funny story, though, is I started on Medium after I probably read for like 6 months before I even started writing. And my purpose was to write humor. I hadn't really written humor before, but my son is hilarious. I think I'm pretty funny. So I was like, let's try humor. I got on there to do that. And then 2016 happened and we elected, that fool. And then he appointed another fool to the Supreme Court. And I was like, well, so anyway, I said, oh my gosh, I got on here to write humor and the world is so serious that I have to write serious stuff. And I did. So I wrote, I do write politically and I started writing political things and then wrote some mental health things. Finally, I don't even remember when I got back to humor, but I was reading James Knight and he was writing for Medium. And I sent him a private message and I said, how do I write for Medium? And he gave me Susan Brearley's information. I contacted Susan and she said, oh yeah, we'd love to have you write. And so I started writing humor. And, my early stuff, I go back and read. And I'm like, well, maybe not so funny. But then I learned so much from the other editors at Medium. They asked me to be an editor about a year in, I think. And I just started learning more and more and more from them. And I love it. I mean, humor to me is just, it's a release for a lot of things. For me, it helps create the gratitude that, defeats depression in many ways. I don't know. I find humor in almost everything now. There's probably one or two huge things in my life that have happened or, will happen at some point that won't be as humorous or humorous at all. But most things I find pretty funny.
Is it fair to say that when it comes to life and the situations that come around, you look for the funny side instead of the silver lining, right? So you're kind of looking for the funny in what's happening and trying to play that up. I think that's a fantastic way to go about it.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, I do think that's accurate. I've always been accused of being gullible, which I still am. After, 30 years of doing therapy, I can still fall for stuff. So I make that funny. I do tend to find silver linings around every cloud. It is kind of my go-to default system. Again, I have depression myself, so I can't always do that. But I can find humor because humor can be dark humor. Mm-hmm. And often my humor is dark humor.
That's great. Is there anything that you would like our listeners to know about you or something that you wanted to share that we didn't talk about?
Boy, we covered an awful lot, Meg.
I have one more thing I want to ask you about, but I don't want to see you.
Well, I will. I do want to throw this out there real quick. I just came back from a Medium Writers Retreat in Poughkeepsie, New York at Susan Brearley's Airbnb, which was just a phenomenal experience. I really encourage people when you get an opportunity to go to writers' conferences or retreats, and especially with other Medium folk, because, we all sort of kind of know each other already. And this particular retreat, we were, most of us there, about a little over half of us were the editors. And these were people I'd met on Zoom or, had talked with in direct messages on our postings. But to meet them in person, spend 3-4 days with them was just a mountaintop experience.
That is.
So I really do recommend.
Yes, I have talked with Susan Brearley. I love, love, love her. And I also know of 2 people that are students in my Ninja Raiders class that went to that conference as well, had similar things to say about how fantastic it was and how great it was. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. The thing that I wanted to remember to ask you about, and I almost forgot, is you managed an alternative rock band.
Yes, I did.
I thought that was so cool. Can you just tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up for today?
Sure. I just, I laughed because it's so funny when I got on and started writing and then I decided to write about that one day, I thought, oh, this one will go viral and people would think I'm insane and, it'll be, and nobody's read it. It's hilarious that nobody is like, nope, nobody cares that you managed an alternative rock band. I was in my late 30s. It was that same midlife crisis. It was a true midlife crisis. The depression from my business closing, not knowing what to do next, not ever having had children. And my husband didn't want children. So I was in a really crazy space and I was teaching a class at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, TCU. And it was a senior advertising, marketing, and PR class. And one of my students had started an alternative rock band, all original music, really amazing. And he asked me if I would manage. And I said, whoa, I never thought about doing such a thing. This was in 92, I guess, 91. And he said, well, come hear us tonight and let me know what you think. And so I went to listen to them and they were phenomenal. So they ranged in age from the oldest was 26 down to the youngest who was 19. And I was in my late 30s. I did. I said, yeah, let's do this. And it was just truly one of the most enjoyable times of my life. And it was wild and crazy. And probably some things happened that were not the best for me long term. But at the time, boy, I had a great time. And the sad part is that they were so phenomenal, but it was, it was internet, but pre-social media. And I think today these guys would have taken off like a rocket. But it was just wonderful. It took in some of my mothering instincts to mother these boys. And then my love of music, a lot of alternative rock back then was also based on some of the basic chords and the beats from the 60s music. Mm-hmm. So that made it very interesting as well. But yeah, we had some wild times. If anybody wants to look that up and read it,
I think it's fantastic. When I read that, I was like, managing an alternative rock band, like how cool is that? Yeah, that's great. I was just curious myself as to how you got into it. And so that's so funny that it's one of those things where somebody asks you a question and you say yes and boom, off you go. And I think that's something that's important for our menopause listeners as well, is sometimes you have to be prepared to say yes to an opportunity that you wouldn't normally consider for yourself, because it's surprising where that can go and how that can end up. I would just encourage everyone listening that say yes to an opportunity when your first reaction is to say no, and just see what happens, because you never know where that leads and where that can go, including going to a screenplay with somebody that you didn't really like on the first date, right? Can turn into writing 2 screenplays as Carol did. So fantastic. I am so glad that you agreed to come and share your story with us today. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Meg.
I think we're going to wrap it for today, everyone. Thanks for listening. And I'm Meg Stewart. I've been here with Carol Lennox. You can find her on Medium. We will link to her profile and stuff in the comments, so you can look for that when you're on the podcast. You should see some notes down at the bottom. Thanks so much, Carol.
Thank you, Meg. Say yes.
Say yes. Yes.
Thanks for listening to Stomp with Debbie Walker, a podcast to encourage, inspire, and empower the woman in the middle. Listen to us on wherever you live in the digital world. And remember, send us a note, like us, and smile. Bye.